What's up, gremlins? Blech. I've been blubbing a lot lately. You're gonna have to deal with it. I don't know how soon this video is getting put out after the last one about this topic, but this is kind of episode 2 of a video series about people that I have idolized in unhealthy ways. And this time I'll be talking about my best friend. And I'm gonna call her Bisky, because I know she would love that. I met Bisky on DeviantArt when I was searching for someone to edit my stories and help me shape them into more solid structures. So our primary interactions for a long time were me presenting her a script or a set of ideas for my stories, and her reading them and giving me her thoughts, criticism, and suggestions. I think every writer should have a few friends who are able to be soundboards for their ideas. However, after a while, I started to rely on Bisky's help a little too much, and I would send her, everything I wrote. Nowadays, I'm more selective with what I send her, because literally I shit out new thoughts every 2 minutes, and I don't want to drown her in shit I could easily just work out myself. But back then, I had no filter. I could smear plot points on a napkin, and I would be bringing these ideas into her DMs for serious story talk all the time. Note to self, don't dump the entirety of your life's ambition onto a college student that doesn't even have time to think about her own stories. Yeah, what I said. So, I'm 99% sure that the main reason I was so reliant on Bisky was because of the story stuff, and a factor that made it even worse was that Bisky either had school or a job or both, and I had really no obligations. I was not an adult in any sense of the word except for legal age. And when you have no obligations, like a job or school or chores or taking care of a loved one or burying your latest murder victim, time moves much slower, so every time your friend is busy, it feels like forever. And then when you tell your friend, who has a life, I miss you and I just don't get to spend time with you anymore, when in reality you just haven't hung out with them for a few days or a week, it's really fucking annoying. I've caught myself doing this to other people, and later I had people do it to me. Look, it's okay to miss your friends, and sometimes they are genuinely busy and can't spend as much time with you as they would like to either. But instead of putting it all on them and whining about stuff they can't control as if somehow they'll go, you know what, you're right, I'll call into work and put off my life just for you, friend, heart. You should instead just acknowledge on a mutual level that you kinda wish you could hang out more. For example, there's a big difference between, man, I miss you. I know you're busy, though. I understand. I hope you at least get some time to relax sometimes, and we'll figure out when to hang out after things calm down and you have more energy. And I just wish you could spend more time with me. It's not the same as it used to be. Work sucks. I wish you didn't have to do it. I'm so lonely ever since you— yeah, it's really important that you don't make them feel guilty for being busy. Anyway, I guess I couldn't resist going off on one of my old habits already. Sorry, I'll get back to the story. So, I was super reliant on Bisky, who was already really busy, and so that put more stress on my dumbass because I was always in a rush to get to the next story idea, and she wasn't able to keep up with all my free time and text dumps and other bullshit. However, we did have a talk one day and express a mutual discouragement with the fact that we weren't really getting any writing or art done, as well as both wishing we could talk more often. So we decided to start meeting up online every week to turn in what we worked on, and we could discuss it with each other. This became what we currently just use as a catch-all hangout date, and we often stream anime or movies on our day. Bisky is the reason I've seen Hunter x Hunter and Hellsing Ultimate, and the reason I'll be able to take on big future projects I'll be working on. But yeah, so we'll come back to the hangouts, but for now let's just make note that those have been established as a thing. Next we need to get into the heavier stuff. So, as we went on with our friendship, I kind of started noticing that whenever Bisky got upset, she would usually just drop hints that my anxiety picked up on and then just stop talking in the group chat that we often hung out in. And then I would follow her into her DMs to prod her to tell me what was bothering her. And usually there was something. It wasn't just my paranoia. And okay, so reliving this part is actually kind of hard for me, but I want to assure the audience and Bisky when she reads or watches this that this misery I'm about to describe is in the past, and I do not, nor have I ever blamed her for being in such a bad position or quote-unquote making me feel bad for her. Obviously, since we were such closely intertwined friends, both of our flaws played off each other, and I'm just thankful that we pulled through and got better together. But audience, I want to paint a brutal picture of what I felt during this time, which means reliving toxic thoughts I used to have, so I'm not gonna look good in this story. I also don't think Bisky would want me to sugarcoat her faults, so I'm gonna lay those out too when it's relevant. Content warning for depression and suicidal thoughts and possessiveness? Is that a word? Look at the title, you knew that was gonna be a thing, right? Back to those times when I would go to Bisky and ask her what was wrong. The way this started happening was, because Bisky didn't tend to voice her problems, I would get this feeling of, well, if she isn't coming to me with her problems, that must mean she doesn't see me the same way I see her. I want her to rely on me too. I want to be her best friend. But because I had this weird longing for closer friendship with her, I would be very timid when asking her to open up because I didn't want to scare her off. It's like I thought I was in a dating sim where if you pick the wrong answer, your crush dislikes you and starts closing themselves off. And there is actually a term for having essentially a platonic crush on someone, and I think that is normal. Usually it's called a squish, a la a softer crush. I still continue to get squishes on friends sometimes, and I don't think it's bad as long as you essentially follow the same guidelines of respect for yourself and the other person that you would for a crush. Or a normal friendship, both of those. But this is past me we're talking about, so anytime I messaged her, I placed myself in such a lower light than her. I was, again, afraid of scaring her away, so my messages were often just a light poke full of disclaimers like, it's okay if you don't want to talk about it, I understand, I was just a little worried, sorry if I'm being paranoid, no homo. God, this literally sounds like how middle schoolers who are afraid of rejection interact with their crushes. And now that I'm saying that out loud, there were actually a couple of short periods of time when I full-on thought I had a romantic crush on her. My feelings were just so intense that I couldn't imagine that they were merely platonic. But me and her were both taken, so I didn't let myself say shit until years later when I was chuckling about what an insecure, stalkerish weirdo I was being. But anyway, I was already desperate for her to trust me and lean on me, but because I went into the friendship in an extremely unhealthy way, I suffered when I started getting what I wanted. Every time she would get upset or even just be a little grumpy in the chat, I would be in her DMs asking what was wrong, trying to comfort her, and desperately hoping she would feel better before she got offline for the night. And very often, those sessions of me trying super hard to cheer her up were accompanied by me crying my eyes out. I rarely ever told her that I was in tears. I mean, how cringy would that be? And by the way, I'm crying over you right now. Ooh. Blech. But I was a mess. Every time there was even a hint that Bisky was less than okay, I was in shambles, worrying myself ragged that I would wake up the next day and she would be gone. And I want to make extra damn sure everyone watching knows how I feel about this. There is no perfect way to go about expressing your depression or stress, because depression and anxiety and PTSD literally cause you to become dysfunctional, so it can be really hard to react appropriately to your feelings. And if you need to talk to someone, especially if your feelings are scary, you should. Your safety is more important than keeping your loved ones comfy at all times, and you should never bottle up your pain and avoid seeking help, even if unfortunately you can't get professional help yet. Having someone there for you can still help keep you afloat. I really genuinely don't think I could solely blame Bisky for the times that she leaned on me a little too hard, because I equally encouraged her to do exactly that because I had this idea that when someone cries on your shoulder more than everyone else's, that means they consider you the closest and most important friend, and I'm in her corner, I made it, I'm the best, she loves me. Also, I wasn't aware of this at the time, but looking back, I think a lot of my conversations with friends that I tried to cheer up were more about me getting them to reach a point where they would say they were okay, so that I would feel relief. Or to get them to reassure me that they weren't going to hurt themselves, and that would help me calm down. And I still struggle with the urge to focus on my own comfort when trying to help others. I think everyone instinctively looks for a reason to be less upset than they are, but I think back then it was worse because I wasn't aware I was doing that, so I couldn't catch myself and readjust my priorities. But for all my fairly accurate perceptions of when Bisky was upset and not saying so, I was awful at recognizing when I was causing her stress that she didn't explicitly tell me about. And I do think part of that had to do with me just being in denial. And just to detour for a second, the reason I should have been paying more attention to subtle cues that Bisky was uncomfortable instead of just crossing my arms and saying, well, if she has a problem, she should say so, is because it takes two to maintain a healthy relationship. And part of that involves looking at your own behavior sometimes and coming to your own conclusion that there's probably a reason your friend is talking to you less or going quiet around you or refusing to challenge you on your opinions ever. If someone is afraid to tell you that you're making them uncomfortable, that can be just as much your fault as it is theirs, and it might be a sign that you need to change something, and that was certainly the case for me. So, the thing that I was failing to pick up on was the fact that Bisky was starting to become uncomfortable with how reliant I was on her, and how that reliance was starting to show itself in the form of jealousy. I didn't know how to properly cope with Bisky choosing to spend time with someone else when she had the option to spend it with me. And if that sounds really shitty of me, that's because it was. I would get jealous of her friends or her boyfriend. I would get really paranoid that she didn't like me enough if she talked out her problems with someone else before me and therefore didn't really need to go through that whole talk again with me. I distinctly remember one time when we were, in a voice call, I think, and her boyfriend came into the room asking her to come give him cuddles or something normal and cute like that. But I guess we hadn't finished our hangout yet, and I got really mad and muted myself so she wouldn't hear me tearing up. I started frantically messaging her, saying things like, "I am not okay with this. It's not fair. He gets to see you every day. He can wait. Just say no. You can't let him guilt you into leaving me." Oh, God. And I'm gonna say this again because I know people in the comments are gonna get mad at me in the present day for this stuff. The way I treated her was toxic and nasty, and I hate the type of person I used to be. Just typing those lines in the script made me wince. It's so gross. I was really, really unhealthy. It was so terrible that my husband, Fluffy, started to notice how bent out of shape I would get about Bisky. How I would have entire anxiety attacks if she was late to our hangout without telling me, how I was jealous of her literal significant other, how I couldn't function if I thought she was sad. It was miserable. But now that I've established all the major ways that I was an absolute tool, let's get back to the timeline and see how this chapter ends. As I said before, a big part of our relationship was about writing in stories. And Bisky eventually reached a point where she had to establish a new boundary regarding that with our friend group. She was in a particularly rough year of college, and several of her friends, including me, were dumping their writing and story ideas all over her while offering nothing in return. And I think she was taking editing commissions on top of that, so she was just exhausted with editing. She told me and our friend group that she was going to have to stop editing our stuff for free because she was so exhausted, and I don't recall anyone giving her a hard time about it. I was a little saddened, of course, but I actually handled it well from what I remember. I think I recognized on some level, even back then, that it was unfair to get upset when Bisky just wanted to rest or have some time for herself. And so if she told me she needed to skip our hangout that week to unwind, or if she said she felt sick or tired and had to go, I would push down any disappointment I had. Then why didn't you push down your— Stop. Okay, I'm getting to that. It seems inconsistent with how selfish I was in regard to her wanting to spend time with someone else, but I think the reason it was so much easier for me to respect her wishes when it was a self-contained issue like sickness or work was because that didn't trigger my crippling fear of losing her to someone else that seems to be consistent in all the ways that I was terrible towards her. After this, we started playing games together for our hangouts, mostly League of Legends, which sucked because that game drove both of us into deep, rage-filled states. I would cry, she would talk about committing Sayori, I would talk about how everything is terrible and we're all garbage and everything is useless. She would get frustrated with me because I thought I was the shit when I knew nothing about the game. I would feel worthless because I sucked at the game no matter how hard I tried to absorb information about the basics of League. It was awful. And if I remember correctly, this was what caused us to finally confront the pent-up stress we had regarding each other. I remember it starting with some conflict that I knew Bisky was having with our friend group, or maybe her family in real life. There was some pent-up resentment from years of not being honest with one another, or needs not being respected, or the other hot messes in our group having their own reasons for taking their insecurities out on others. And she tweeted something about how she was sick of everyone around her giving zero shits about her feelings and her needs. How she felt like she didn't matter at all, and she felt so neglected and like it was always on her to compromise and never on the other person in any given relationship she was in. And I saw that, and immediately got offended that she would imply that everyone in her life was using her because I was inherently part of everyone. Hashtag not all! So that's what I literally did. I messaged her on Discord and told her that I didn't think it was fair that she would generalize like that because to me it felt like she was diminishing or downplaying how much I cared about her. And frankly, I do think that the way someone talks about how much support they have speaks volumes, because there was a reason she didn't specify except one person in her tweet. And honestly, if someone you know is talking directly to you and you believe you do meet their needs, but they say nobody cares about me, that could potentially be an indication that you're included in that, at least in some capacity. But also, hashtag not alling people who are venting about how alone they feel is kind of fucking shitty. Maybe try to help them through their struggles instead of making it all about you and how great you are. Reminding them that you think you're the one special snowflake friend that never hurts them doesn't help their situation and only serves to solidify to them that nobody ever prioritizes their feelings. Anyway, I think this situation might have left Bisky feeling a little cornered. At first she argued with me and I don't remember what she said and I frankly have no desire to go find those messages. They're on Skype anyway. But then I remember pointing out this one communication issue we had where she had missed our hangout by one night and left me hanging. It was like she thought it was Monday, but it was actually Tuesday or something. So, like, on Monday, she arrived and was like, it's time for our hangout, and I was like, oh, what do you mean what? I'm not doing that tonight, because it wasn't Monday, and she got mad about it, and then the next day I was like, okay, time for our hangout, and she was like, really? You know what I mean? And when I brought it up, she fought me out at first, but I insisted that I hadn't been vague in our planning and that I didn't mess anything up, and she kind of gave up and admitted to me that she had been finding ways to avoid our hangouts. She told me about how my depressed rants about how terrible everything was during our games made her uncomfortable, and how she noticed how I seemed so dependent on her and that made her feel guilty because she knew she wasn't a healthy person either, and she didn't want me to base my happiness on whether she was okay because there were going to be times when she wasn't. I don't remember the exact plan of action we came up with, but after that night, Bisky and I promised each other to start working on those problems and to give each other a little more space when it was needed. And ever since then, we've been able to heal both individually and as friends. I'm astonished every day by how far we've come. We've lifted each other up during some of our lowest moments, we've built tons of wonderful memories with each other, and we've inspired each other. I mean, that's a given. Who wouldn't be inspired by my hot anime takes? This is supposed to be serious! Oh, and your appearance indicates that? Are you making fun of me? When I posted my last video about how I let my idolization of Vivzy Pop affect me, someone pointed out that honestly it wasn't too unusual for a teenager, like I was at the time, to start having such intense feelings of admiration for an artist, and that's a good point. A lot of the stuff we cringe at from our past is just kinda normal growing up stuff. And in a similar vein, I feel like it's hard to fully condemn myself or Bisky for unusual behavior either, because, speaking only for myself here, my mind was so limited. When you have mental health issues, it can sometimes take a bizarre conflict that makes everyone uncomfortable to acquire a piece of functionality that other people develop naturally. Trauma and mental illness block some of those things, like learning how to respond appropriately to other people or how to cope with hardships in your life. Both Bisky and I are mentally ill, and in the past we unfortunately didn't have the proper support and medication that we do now. So even though some of the things we did were wrong, I don't hold it against us, if that makes sense. We both got to make right with each other at the same time, and that helped a lot with not building up bad memories of one another. There have been several times when Bisky and I have apologized for past wrongdoings to people we distinctly remember hurting in a specific way, including each other. And these people didn't even recognize what we were talking about because they were just as messy as we were at the time. So I think I can give advice on how to handle this better than we did without speaking badly of those in similar positions. One of the most important things in any relationship is clear, honest communication, and it can't just come from one of you, it has to come from both. I have always prided myself in being as honest as I could, but as I got older, I realized that not everyone is willing or able to uphold that same level of honesty with me, and that is when communication becomes difficult. I can't tell certain people in my life how I really feel about things because I know they would respond defensively and then continue doing the thing that bothers me, and the only thing that will have changed is that I pissed them off one time. But when you have a friendship with someone, it's equally important to receive criticism with grace as it is to be honest when you have criticism to give. If you're in so much pain that it's hard to get through a single day, try to be honest about that so your friends and family can be a little more understanding when you inevitably have outbursts. If you find yourself crumbling into a heap of depression every single time someone you love is less than happy, you should definitely examine your relationship with that person, and why you are that dependent on their mood. Even romantic partners shouldn't be completely demolished anytime their love is sad. If you're beginning to resent people you love because they keep doing crappy things to you, try to find the courage to tell them how you feel. If those people respond in a shitty manner, you shouldn't feel guilty about distancing yourself from them for your own mental health. And with that in mind, if someone approaches you with a concern about how your behavior affects them, please try to be open to understanding their feelings and parsing what you might need to change. Even if your behavior is a result of trauma or mental illness or stress, it's okay and valid if you have a reason for your behavior, and you're allowed to explain how you feel, but just because you have a reason doesn't mean you aren't hurting anyone. Oh, and don't pull an Act 2 Yuri and start obsessively clinging to people like you're going to die if you're not breathing the same air as them. That's kind of a problem. I'm thinking about telling possibly the least dark and downright stupidest story in my lineup for the next video in this series. Because after that, we got the stuff that might have actually traumatized me, so I'll give y'all a break from the sad first. Until next time, you— Can I do the outro? Sure, go for it. Thanks for watching! Leave a like if you liked the video, or a dislike if you need to scoot a good 12 inches away from Grim when he sits near you. We don't discriminate. Thanks for that. We wanna plug our Patreon because we like money. Ooh, I also recently redesigned my Angry Librarian Tumblr blog because the last theme I had was the laziest shit I've ever seen. I also have a Twitter, Facebook, DeviantArt, and Vlare.tv as a backup to this channel.
Hey, psst, shoot, my outro!
We love you all. See you next time.